Welcome to the Market Review, where we discuss developments in the financial and capital market as it relates to the economy. Today we have an interesting topic around real estate investment trust, an interesting part of the market and how it can be used as a tool to deepen the Nigerian capital market. With me to have this conversation is Mr. Hakeem Ogunniran. He's the founder and CEO of Eximia Realty Company Limited. Good morning and nice to have you on the program, sir.
Thank you very much. Morning. I'm pleased to be back this morning.
Yes. Just to let us viewers know that REITs are very valuable tools and instruments in the market. Currently, we have over 200 REITs globally. The US alone has a $1.1 trillion value of assets of REITs, while globally it is now hit about $3 trillion. 35 nations have active legislations in REITs and more to come. So definitely it's an opportunity to deepen markets, and Nigeria is not an exception in that regard. So let's begin with understanding the concept of REITs. Mr. Gunnar, if you can take us through the concept of REIT and how important it is to the market and investors.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for having me again on this program. It's always a pleasure to be back here. Real estate investment trust, REITs, they are vehicles, regulated vehicles created by the law to enable people have access to investment in real estate. So essentially, the vehicles are created, assets are aggregated in the vehicle, and units of shares or units of the asset are sold. But these are not identifiable units. So for example, if you create a REIT of 1 billion, you could have 1 billion units of shares in quotes in it, and then people buy units in that vehicle. And when profits are made, it is distributed proportionately to your interest in the holding. So that's essentially, what REITs are. But we must emphasize that it is called a trust because of its origin. In the US, before 1960, organizations who had properties not as part of their core business, they could not unlock value in those assets. So they used a mechanism called the Massachusetts Trust to achieve that purpose. It was that trust that now evolved and eventually became the Real Estate Investment Trust by a law that was enacted in the US in 1960. So that's the origin of REIT. So essentially, it's a vehicle that is created to allow property owners to aggregate their properties and sell parts of the units to members of the public or any discerning investor. That's just it in a nutshell.
A beautiful way to package the real estate sector and deepen participation, a kind of product that will help to improve the market. Then that's interesting. And of course, real estate is one sector that is valuable. I mean, buy a house or buy properties, the value is always there. So definitely, that's interesting. We'll still come to that. But how from your experience and of course, observing the markets, we've seen like US holding $1.1 trillion in terms of assets of the REITs. But how has it helped to boost liquidity and in the market? And what are the opportunities for doing this in Nigeria? We know that we had an ambitious plan in Nigeria Stock Exchange to have a $1 trillion capitalization in terms of market. So how can REITs help to boost that in the future?
Okay, I mean, if I give you some figures about the US, I see that you have mentioned the US. The US is the progenitor of REITs.
Yeah.
As of 2020, there are around 45 million investors in REIT stocks in over 1,000 investment funds. Gross assets is $3.5 trillion US, and that is invested in over 520,000 properties. Equity market capitalization of more than 1.4 trillion for listed REITs. In 2019, approximately 69 billion US dollars was paid out as dividends by REITs. I mean, so you can see that if we pay attention to REITs as an asset class. You know, the benefit cuts across the entire chain. Not only the developers, the investors, government, everybody benefits from REITs. You know, that's what and you have mentioned the issue of liquidity. One of the advantages of REITs is that it brings liquidity to the table. As an asset class, real estate is generally illiquid, because your asset to conversion cycle is always long. However, if you invest in REITs, because REITs are usually traded on the stock exchange, theoretically, you can buy and sell your units in the REITs. Pretty much the same, you buy and sell stocks of limited liability companies. So that's why we emphasize the fact that REITs bring liquidity as an advantage to the table for investors.
This is very, very interesting to note. I mean, the US remains a progenitor, like you said, a huge market and huge opportunities for Nigeria to leverage on. And let me just take you to recently, last week, you had this book around the law and practice of REITs, and you looked at it as an innovative solution in terms of the markets and the economy. From that interesting engagement, what for you are the key takeaways and the summary of this recent book you have, and how you improve the REITs market in Nigeria?
Okay. First of all, you know that in my previous life, I had the privilege of leading my company at that time, my team, to floating the REITs 2012, 2013. At that time, there was serious dearth of knowledge on REITs, and we really had to go all over the world, searching for knowledge, just trying to understand the asset class. That was very important for me. Now, when we launched the REIT in 2013, very successful REIT, which, by the way, I understand is about 65-70% of the total REIT market in Nigeria today. But that's a different story. But after we launched the REIT, I had the privilege of being invited to speak on the subject matter. As a matter of fact, in an 8-year period, I was invited to speak at over 24 conferences all over Africa, in the UK, in Nigeria, Joburg, everywhere, And incidentally, this was also a time when there was so much advocacy around the reform of REIT agenda in Africa. They were just about to reform the REIT, the REIT legislation in South Africa. A whole lot was happening, So that experience helped me to gather material, build networks all over Africa, and it became imperative for me, to put my thoughts together. So what I've done basically is to write a book, which we have called The Law and Practice of Real Estate Investment Trusts, but with highlights of African REIT models, So there's a whole chapter dealing with the 4 major proper REIT regimes in Africa, which is Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Rwanda. So there's a whole chapter where we have compared the REIT variables, in all those countries. But beyond that, what we have done with this book, number one, is to trace the evolution of REITs, because a lot of people misunderstand the asset class. So I really had to really go to do deep research to understand the origin, the evolution in the US. I had to go as far as studying congressional debates in the US, on the asset class. I went through the debates one after the other, just to understand the mind of the legislatures as to what exactly do they intend to create as an asset class. So that sets the foundation of the origin of the REITs. And of course, after it was fully adopted in the US, it became an international asset class, beginning with Netherlands in 1969, and then so many other countries now. So that evolution, particularly the role of legislation, in the book, I emphasize the fact that law has been the principal driver. So anywhere you want to create a proper REITs regime, the law has to be the active driver. In South Africa, before 2013, they had 2 regimes. They had the property unit trusts, and they had the property loan stocks, which looked like REITs, but without the tax advantage of REITs. So in 2013, they had to merge, and then they brought out a legislation, and then they created a proper REITs position. Now, I've also traced the evolution in Nigeria. We've come a long way, by the way, starting from the Investment and Securities Act in 2007, which created unit trusts and tried to apply the rules of unit trust to REITs. And that was very challenging. But over the years, there have been a whole lot of amendments, which have come into being, culminating in the Finance Act of 2019. And I think the Finance Act has really created perhaps the most fundamental element of a REIT, which is create the asset as a transparent flow-through investment vehicle. Because if you look at Section 6 and Section 9 of the Finance Act, it says something like dividends and rent received by the entity on behalf of its shareholders. That is very important, because the essence of REITs is an asset class based on the conduit theory. The conduit theory says that entity that collects the rent or dividend does not collect for itself. It collects it on behalf of the owners of the entity. And that is the base of taxation. That is why you cannot tax the rent and the dividends at the entity level and then tax again at the unit holders level. And I think that we have been able to achieve with the Finance Act. And so basically that's what we try to do in the book. Of course, we also look at other areas, just to ensure that we have a complete text on our hands. Yes.
It's just very interesting to see how it has evolved in Africa. I mean, the fact that the property unit trust has been merged with the property loan stock in South Africa, and of course in Nigeria, Finance Act has captured the rate, like you rightly said, as a transparent and flow-through investment vehicle. So definitely the taxation, it's nice to know that you won't tax the unit holder, but you can tax as an entity. This is very important to help the industry or the asset class grow and support the market. But let's look at the recent developments in the Nigerian capital market. The demutualization now, so we don't call it Nigerian Stock Exchange, we call it Nigerian Exchange Limited, with the approval of the Securities and Exchange Commission. 3 companies with the holding group of Nigeria Exchange Group. But we have the real estate company, the RealCo. How is this going to also help improve, of course, the real estate segment in the market and boost activities like the REITs, the asset class?
Okay. First of all, the completion of the demutualization process is very great for us. I already sent a congratulatory message to Oscar and the team, all those who have been involved when this was eventually completed. We've come a long way. We've been on this since 2002, actually. It's taken almost 20 years, but finally we're here. But just to address your question specifically, I think the RealCo, as I understand it, number one, will take charge of the real estate assets of the exchange, including the exchange, the stock exchange building on Custom Street and all that assets. And I think that is very important because I think one part of the problem before was that you had a mutual society presiding over companies with sophisticated programs and initiatives and things like that. But now with the new structure, the exchange itself will be subject to all the fundamental principles. So you have to practice what you preach in terms of corporate governance, in terms of relationship between the holdco and the subsidiaries. So I imagine that the RealCo that holds the asset will have to deal with both the regulation company and the operating company, and even the holding company on arm's length basis. They have to infuse the principles of transfer pricing and all those things, in their operation. So I think it has created the right governance framework, that enables the Nigerian Exchange Regulation Company, to lead by example, And I also think that the fact that we have a RealCo also underscores the importance that is attached to real estate as an asset class, So I imagine that we'll do a whole lot with the RealCo in the near future. It won't be out of place, for example, if the holding company itself, decides to float a REIT, because now we are operating as no longer as a not for profit. So you have to look for opportunity to unlock value in your assets and deliver good returns to the shareholders. So I won't be surprised if the exchange building is converted into an asset class, either as a REIT or a RECO in the near future, so that value can be sucked out of the building and distributed to the institutional and individual holders in the new entity. So I think it's a great development, and we're watching that very, very closely.
Very, very closely. I just wanted to speak to the economic state. I mean, the real estate, at least after a while now, posted growth, and a lot of people said that contributed to the surprising, according to World Bank, surprising exit from recession. Do you see that trend sustained in subsequent growth reports from the NBS?
Okay, I mean, I always stress that real estate as a sector will thrive off the back of strong macro fundamentals. So where the fundamentals are weak, definitely the sector struggles. I read a report that Nigeria is out of recession, but Nigerians are not out of recession. Because those are two different things. But to speak specifically to the sector, the reality of the matter is that the sector is under heavy burdens. And I'll give you just one or two examples. Before COVID lockdown, price of reinforcement per metric ton was 120,000 naira per metric ton. Then we went into lockdown. By the time lockdown was lifted in October 2020, that price went from 120,000 to 240,000 naira, and everybody was shouting. Now, by this week, the price has gone to 370,000 naira per metric ton. So it's just crazy, and with the devaluation of the naira again, we must understand that most of our inputs are imported, even though there are some local substitutes now, but it's just a small percentage of the requirements of the industry. Prices have gone beyond the roofs, So the economics of construction, at this time is difficult to understand, and when people speak of affordable housing, I always argue that it is difficult to deliver such type of houses in this type of dispensation,
Okay, this type of dispensation, not like what happened in the past, in the days of the late Jaconde and others.
Okay, the late Jaconde did a fantastic thing, and I still think it can be done now. You have to create a window that will deliver those houses. You cannot go and buy land in the open market, do your approval in the normal way, import without any concession, pay all the taxes, deal with all the regulatory agencies. The unit cost of the houses will simply not be affordable. So I'm still waiting for that government that will understand that you have to create a unique window for affordable houses, give land at concessionary rate, work with federal government to ensure that when you import materials for this particular project, you are giving concession on import duties, you are giving concession on clearing time, get concession on approval and all the other rates, so as to make the whole economy to make some sense. But as it is now, we are thrown into the jungle, just to deliver, and it is simply difficult. Sometimes when I hear of some prices, I say these guys, they are miracle workers, they are not developers, and unfortunately, I'm just a developer, I'm not a miracle worker. I can only do what the market, is allowing us to do.
Yeah, affordable housing is something that, like you rightly said, if nations take it seriously, discuss with several experts, they talk about what China has done, what Brazil is trying to do. So like you rightly said, creating a unique window in this regard with the whole value chain is very important. because look at Lagos. Lagos homes are very nice, but the affordability is very important too for all classes. So that is something.
And even beyond that, we have to start building to scale. Creating that window will enable us to build to scale. I think I mentioned it the last time I came on this program that we are still building houses. We have to start manufacturing houses. We have to start building to scale. Now we also have to work on the legal system, so that we can commoditize housing. We have to be able to buy and sell houses pretty much the same way you buy and sell any other product. But as it is now, because of all the legal complications, the rules around consent, around perfection of title and things like that, once you build a house, you find it difficult to move. In other parts of the world, when people move jobs, they sell their houses, they buy another house. But here, it is impossible. That's why once you build your first house in Akuti, you can't sell. You are there almost forever. And that's just the reality. That's the reality. You don't even have title to sell.
Titles. So titling and we said it last time, the issue of titling, adopting technology, ensuring that we also have proper building to scale, and legal framework is very key. And state governments play a very important role. These are what stakeholders are saying in the industry, in also providing those titling enablers for properties and housing. But let's look at the outlook for rates in Nigeria. What do you see as the outlook? This is a very important asset class. Like you said, a lot of investors should be interested, even down to retail, institutional, high net worth individuals. Everybody should now begin to latch into the opportunities that it brings.
Okay, first of all, we have to mention that REITs bring to the table significant advantages. It helps to unlock value. REITs are better than shares because for REITs, there's regulation of income and there's regulation of distribution. In the case of a limited liability company, the directors decide how much is shared as dividends. But for REITs, the law has stipulated how much will be paid. Minimum is 75%. In some countries, it is as high as 100%. So because part of what part of the benefit is certainty and regularity of income. So you're sure that leases are already tied up, the rentals are coming, and once so you can predict that this is how much I'm going to get, because you know that by law, the entity is obliged to pay this particular amount. And of course, there is the tax advantage that is not taxed in the hand of the entity and in the hand of the unit holder. And then REIT helps to deepen the market, because real estate is a capital intensive business, and you have to find ways to aggregate capital. And the best way to do it is to have access to asset vehicles that can access the funds. I was speaking at a conference yesterday, and I told them that today in our pension fund, we have 12.3 trillion naira in the pension funds. Now, pension funds are not allowed to invest directly in real estate, but they can invest in real estate vehicles. The investment limit set for them is between 5 and 25%. And so let's just take 10% of 12.3 trillion. If we're able to create asset classes that could access this, the story of this industry changes forever. So it helps to deepen the market. In terms of outlook, two things I must mention. Number one, the Finance Act has solved a lot of the problems. There are still a few gray areas of the Finance Act, which we're still going to take up with the regulators. And I already had a conversation in Lagos. I'm going to have another conversation in Abuja. And this is trying to bring the regulators together for us to look at the few areas, the I's that we need to dot and the T's that we need to cross, just to ensure that we have a REITs regime that is fully in line with best in class. The other thing is that if you look at the book in the last chapter, I looked at what next for REITs legislation, and I looked at sustainability, I looked at risk management, and I looked at technology. Now, technology is very critical because today there are rules on crowdfunding. In other parts of the world now, you could convert a physical asset into a digital asset and tokenize and sell tokens. But the basis of the tokenization is unitization of the asset itself. And that's what the REIT does. So when you when you create a vehicle, you create the unit, it is these units that you convert to tokens that you will sell, to people, to investors in the in the asset. However, I've also mentioned the point in the book that we should not overemphasize the digital aspect, because at the end of the day, when people invest in the digital assets, the returns they are going to get will come from the optimal management of the physical asset. So that is also very critical. So aligning that bridge and understanding the need for that alignment is very critical.
So aligning the digital and the physical assets aspects are very important. I like the fact that you're engaging further, despite what the finance sector has done, the gray areas, and we hope that those issues will be addressed to create more investor confidence. And of course, the issue of legislation, sustainability, risk management, and technology will remain very critical for our REITs legislations. But the one aspect that I like most is the fact that you said it provides for investors certainty and, of course, regularity in terms of income. That's right. There's certainty.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Certainty, regularity. So if you look at the US, most pensioners invest in REITs, because they know that once they leave their business, once they leave their work and they're now retired, they have access to a consistent stream of income that comes from REITs.
Definitely, and it's not impossible that Nigeria can run into a $1 trillion REIT market, even competing with US. It's all about thinking boldly and being very ambitious on strategy. Thank you very much, Mr. Hakeem Ogunniran, founder and CEO of Eximia Realty Company Limited, for this very interesting conversation around REITs as tools of capital market development in Nigeria, and also the recent book that you launched on laws and practice of REITs, believing that will also add to knowledge and increase awareness on this asset class and what it can do to deepen the market and create value for investors. Thank you once again for the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you always.
That will be all for this edition of the Market Review. As you heard the conversation around real estate investment trust, it's a market tool that can really help to boost the market and create value for investors. To get further insights on this, you can log on to our website, www.proshareng.com, and scroll down, click on capital market and also property and assets. You'll see a lot of developments in that regard. Also, our guest today has a book, and you can follow them at Eximia on Twitter on these developments around REITs. We'll continue this conversation some other time again, but don't forget to stay safe this period, and let's continue to discuss the market as it grows. Thank you for being part of the show today. Have a nice day.